it's Roger Ewing Taylor, Man Across America. Finally cooled down. It was awful yesterday, wasn't it? Really bad. Anyway, it's cooler now. We're in southern Pennsylvania at Fort Necessity National Historical Park. This is where a very young 21-year-old Major George Washington made his stand against the French to begin the French and Indian War. This is Jacob, is it? Yeah, Jacob, a volunteer. And Jacob, you're dressed as what today?
I'm dressed as a member of the Virginia Regiment.
Which George Washington was leading at the time.
Yes, that's correct.
Right. Okay, let's see what's going on in this park. In 1754, the Ohio Valley area was contested by the English and the French. A 21-year-old George Washington was leading a regiment of Virginia militia men to build a road through this region. Learning that the French were there in strength, Washington fell back to an area called the Great Meadows, which he considered to be a charming place for an encounter. The young commander would soon learn the error of this decision. Washington and his men built a circular palisade within the Great Meadows, by necessity, he deemed. He therefore dubbed the structure Fort Necessity. Within the palisade was a storehouse for materials. The palisade itself was guarded by swivel guns. Washington had about 390 men and settled in to defend his fort. On July 3rd, the French arrived with about 600 men and 100 Native American allies. Washington and his men took up positions in the breastworks, ditches dug around the fort. It was raining heavily, and the ditches were filling with water. In the meantime, the French were firing from the tree line. Washington's forces were surrounded. The young commander had picked a poor place to defend, a mistake he would never make again in his career. Ultimately, Washington had to surrender. By the terms of the surrender, he and his men kept their guns and were allowed to leave. This would be the only time Washington would surrender. This would also mark the beginning of what was later called the French and Indian War, or the 7 Years' War.
And then lastly, we get to what you guys have all been waiting for, the musket. So this is the French Charleville musket. This is a French standard issue musket. And I know what you're probably thinking, Jacob, you're a Virginian. Why do you want to use that crummy French thing? Well, this musket is actually much better crafted than, say, the long land pattern musket or the Brown Bess, as most people know it as. And it's far better crafted than the crummy Dutch variety musket that I would have been issued as a member of the Virginia Regiment. It's also a lot lighter in weight. So perhaps I killed a Frenchman and took this off of him, maybe at the Jumonville Affair. Or perhaps I purchased this before coming out on campaign if I had the money for it. But like I said, it's better crafted and it's lighter weight than, say, those British or Dutch muskets. So most of you probably know how a flintlock ignition system works. Basically, this flint strikes this steel, which hopefully creates a spark, which hopefully ignites some powder that I put in this pan here, which hopefully sends that spark going through the touch hole, which hopefully ignites a charge in the bottom of the barrel, which hopefully sends a bullet rattling down the barrel, which hopefully hits something at the end of it with a whopping range, as Ranger Brian said earlier, of 60 to 80 yards, so not even a football field. But that explains why men would get in those tight formations, march up to each other, and shoot each other so closely. It's not because they were stupid or anything, it's because of the weapon that they were using at the time. If you want to think about it, a company of soldiers is almost like a human machine gun. You have your first line fire, they step aside, move back, the next line fires while that line is reloading, so you have a constant volley of fire. Not only that, it explains why we wear these bright uniforms, because what does this create a lot of? Smoke. So if you have a lot of smoke, and if it's, say, a humid day like today where all that smoke's going to stay low, and you have 400 people firing one of these, or firing these at once, there's going to be a lot of smoke. So that's why I wear the bright uniform, so I stand out on the battlefield. And where else do you guys like bright uniforms and line tactics? Any of you like football? Yeah, so You try to say that 18th century European style warfare, that's stupid, but a lot of people still watch it today in American football. You're then going to be told to handle cartridge. So you're going to come around and slap their cartridge box, which settles any loose powder in these paper tubes. You're then going to bite off the top with the 2 opposing teeth that were required for military service at the time, spitting out the top and holding it under their chin, so they're given the order to prime pan. So we're going to prime that pan with black powder, close the hammer, and cast the musket about. We're then going to charge the rest of the cartridge down the barrel, and please remember that there would be a ball in this cartridge as well. They're then going to be given the order to draw rammer and ram cartridge. They're then going to be given the order to return rammer. At that point, they go to their shouldered position, which was the cue to their commanding officer that they were ready to fire. It is also the cue to you guys that I'm ready to fire. So if you don't like loud noises or you're sensitive to loud noises, of course there's no shame in holding your ears. They'll then be told to make ready, where they'd go to full cock, take aim, and fire. And then they would immediately go back down to that recovery position. If they're saying in the heat of combat and they needed to load much faster, they would be given the order to prime and load. At that time, they would then load the musket as quickly as possible without having to go through each of those individual steps. A good British soldier could get off about 3 to 4 shots a minute. I am not a good British soldier. Remember, I'm a member of the Virginia Regiment, so if I'm lucky, maybe 2 shots a minute, because I'm just going to be a...
Fort Necessity isn't a huge national park, but it's got some lovely trails and guides and demonstrations like we saw. Also has this great playground for the kids. There are lots of national historical sites, and you can find links to many of them through my websites. This is Roger Ewing Taylor, Man Across America, and I'll catch you at the next stop.